Are you worried about having dementia, Alzheimer's disease, or some other form of dementia? It is one of the greatest fears of many people as they age. And I often hear, I don't want to live so long that my brain no longer functions the way it should. And I want to talk about a recent paper that came out that talks about the genetic risk of Alzheimer's. So we're going to jump right into this. This is kind of a deeper paper. It might take me a little bit longer to explain than 1 minute, but I think it will be worth your time to know, should you get screened for these genes? And if you have these genes, does it mean for sure you're going to have Alzheimer's disease or some other form of dementia? So let's jump right into it. All right. So this study, ApoE4 homozygosity represents distinct genetic form of Alzheimer's disease. So face value, that doesn't sound super interesting. You know, ApoE4 is a gene that we've known, and what this codes for is lipoprotein packaging. And we've known that this gene causes a higher risk of Alzheimer's disease. So it doesn't seem like, knowing that you have two of these copies, everybody has two copies of the ApoE gene. And if you have two copies of ApoE4, your risk for Alzheimer's is higher. So it doesn't seem like this is that interesting of a paper on the face of it. But as you dig in, the conclusion from the study is really that they make the case that everybody who has ApoE44 will have Alzheimer's disease. Now, I have some real problems with this study. And first and foremost, my biggest problem, and we're going to go to the discussion here, I'm going to zoom in. And they say this right here. We showed that this present near full penetrance of Alzheimer's disease biology. And so basically they're saying, if you have this disease, it will penetrate, meaning that it will show up in your body as Alzheimer's disease. But this is where I really have a hard time with this. And I'm not a neurologist. I'm sure neurologists will be like, hey, Jared, stay in your lane. But this is where the problem is. It says that in this respect, it is worth noting that Alzheimer's disease is now considered a biological entity that can be diagnosed in vivo based on the presence of Alzheimer's disease biomarkers. So what that's saying is we can diagnose you with Alzheimer's disease just based on tests from your cerebral spinal fluid or from an MRI or a PET scan. You don't have to show any signs or symptoms, meaning you could be still solving calculus equations. You could still be working as a physician, still doing surgery in the OR. And they would say, you have Alzheimer's disease if we find these biomarkers in this PET scan and the MRI, which to me is ridiculous. That's like saying you found biological markers that could say, I can't walk, but I'm walking. And so what do your biological markers mean? Because when you dig into the data, let's just look at the first table, which I think is interesting. So let's just look at this, ApoE44. So they had 273 people with ApoE44. And if you come down here, this is mild cognitive impairment. This is Alzheimer's disease. So 21% had Alzheimer's disease. 22% had mild cognitive impairment. Now, this was diagnosed clinically, meaning that a clinician did tests and said this person has mild cognitive impairment or this person has Alzheimer's disease. 57% did not test positive for that. So they're basically ignoring this 57% and saying, we don't care because we have this ADNC, we have these other tests that show that you biologically have Alzheimer's disease. So that's my problem with this. So here are my takeaways. Now, that was super nerdy, way nerdier than I usually go, but this is important. Here's my takeaways. Should you get screened for ApoE status? So if you have ApoE44 or you have ApoE34, your risk for Alzheimer's disease goes up. So just looking at the ADNC, here's your risk. If you go down here to the lowest, which is ApoE2 status, then your risk is 32%. Now, again, this is just biological. So this isn't actual Alzheimer's disease in my book. Actual Alzheimer's disease is down here, 21%, ApoE3, 10%, and at the lowest, 3.2%. So to me, yes, your risk is significantly higher. So let's call this baseline risk. Like you don't have any of the pathological genes. So your baseline risk for Alzheimer's disease over your lifetime is about 4%. And if you have, 3, 4, it looks like that's more than double. Now, this isn't a study that's trying to show you kind of the prevalence of the disease, but I'm just using this table because this is what we have in front of us. And then you've got 5 times the risk if you have ApoE44. And the reason you should get screened is there are things that you can do to decrease your risk. Now, I would say everybody should be doing these things no matter what. Everybody should be exercising their brain, making sure their cholesterol levels are good, that their omega-3 index is good, all of those things. But if you have ApoE44, how much more would you be motivated to do that? So knowing this is powerful because it motivates you. It lets you know there is a problem here that I do need to take care of. If I don't take care of it, then the likelihood of me having Alzheimer's disease goes up. So again, apologize for a longer video, but I think this is important enough to just say this study that basically last week when it was published, I think it was, it was published May 6th, so a little over a week ago. And everybody was saying, if you have ApoE44, 100%, you're going to get Alzheimer's. That's what this study proves. I disagree because I don't think that a biological diagnosis is the same as a clinical diagnosis. And we have things that you can do to make this better. So hopefully that's helpful for all of you who've been tested. And if you haven't been tested, I hope you get tested. Take care.